And we're live. We're here with my good buddy Robert Regnier in the studio. A little Sunday afternoon podcast. Just kind of dropping in on you guys, saying what's up, having a little conversation. We already had all the good conversations in the other room before the podcast, but that's why I started a podcast. Record great conversations. So what's up, man? What have you been up to?
A lot of the same life, man, for the most part.
Excellent, yeah. So, for those of you that don't know Robert, licensed massage therapist, cool life story. I'll let him kind of fill you guys in on some of his thoughts and approaches on things. But when did you get into massage therapy? What was what kind of led you down that path?
It's kind of a family tradition, man. We sit around the house at the end of the day, just rubbing feet, rubbing backs, whatever. And
Cora makes me do that.
Yeah, just hanging out as a family. And I had my grandma. Most of us have that little native story in our family bloodline at this point. And she was, healer. She's one of those people that could just tell you a lot about yourself and, dietary things and herbs. And apparently my great-grandpa on my dad's side, who I never knew, was a herbalist and could tell you, whatever's laying around on the ground, just what to do with it and, how to grow it and how to keep it. And I had wanted to be a plastic surgeon when I was a kid because I had gone through some pretty traumatic injuries. And I was fascinated with helping people with things that otherwise I wouldn't have been able to accomplish. And
for sure.
So I realized, mid-teens, that I didn't ever want to do 8, 12 years of school, all the rigor, all the things that come with being a doctor in our country. So I joined the military when I was about 19, and as soon as I was, stable on my own, doing my thing, and was working a corporate job, Verizon Wireless, and ended up doing night school at one of the better, it's called the Steiner Institute. They have one of the better massage therapy programs in the school because, just my opinion, is most massage therapy programs in the country are lackluster. They aren't what they could have been.
I feel like it's almost like very commercialized approach, I will say that opinion almost kept me from getting massages for a long time. You're really you've been working on me for a couple of years now, and it's made a big difference. That in addition to occasional chiropractic visits, and then I've been doing yoga, and I've always stretched multiple times a day just with all the training, but. I went and got some massages, but it was never really like, man, that was so beneficial, I got to go back, or man, I really felt that working out a serious issue in my hip, and that's, but you do have a different approach versus anyone else that I've ever had work on me, because I never went back for second, third, fourth visits, or was like, yeah, let's make that happen. Whereas the very first time that you worked on me, I was like, it was a noticeable difference. So where did you go to school? Was that in Arizona?
Yeah, Steiner owns a umbrella of schools under the Utah College of Massage Therapy, UCMT, and the Tempe campus for the Arizona School of Massage Therapy was where I went, and they taught us everything from Eastern. We learned ancient Eastern traditions. They have what's called a Master Bodyworker program, basically a continuing education program. And they'll teach you Reiki, so you're learning straight energy and metaphysical, touch. And they teach you more about Eastern history than anything. It's called Advanced Eastern Paradigm is the actual course. So, and then on top of that, we learned a lot of even what Western medicine and current Eastern medicine, more like Russian sports and things like that, not what's happening currently with traditional Chinese herbalism or anything like that. We don't go quite that far.
Yeah, that's one thing that most herbalists that I meet, Mr. Dean, he's a big time herbalist. I actually had borrowed a book from him a couple of years ago. I just gave back to him, which he knows quite a bit, and has turned me on to some different teas and things to make that had helped me out, like when I was recovering from my surgery. So I came home from the hospital after just having a simple procedure, hernia repair, and I was all jacked up. Like my immune system got jacked up, and like had this crazy issue with my skin. Like I had these little circular things start popping up on my skin, and I had never had anything like that in the past, and it was like an issue for over a year. And then just like drinking teas, and it was then I too, like I really watch my diet super closely, like way more closely than I have been recently. But I've still not, like it's under control. But it was drinking herbal teas that definitely made all the difference in my view. I was doing things with chamomile, like red clover and comfrey root and some things of that nature. And I got that stuff under control, and that was after exhausting all dermatological and my general practitioner, everything. I went and saw everybody, and they were just like, oh, well, we don't really know what to do. And they were just chunking me full of antibiotics and Z-Paks and penicillin and just trashing my immune system even more. And then I was trying to get it back in control with probiotics and these herbal teas. But I'm actually a big-time believer in nutritional and herbal medicine. Is a great fundamental approach depending on what you're dealing with in other means. Let me ask you this real quick. So you and I, which like I'm an open-minded individual, and I've not it's not like I believe in things like empty touch martial arts and things of that nature, where I'm just like, I'm gonna throw you out of your chair over there like this. But so we both listen to Joe Rogan and stuff quite a bit. Like we've listened to a lot of episodes together, just like working out, working around the house, whatever. He's been critical of Reiki in the past. I had only heard you, which he's also been critical of chiropractic care, and I've referred some of my guys that just were like, man, I feel like I can't train right now, my shoulders. And I was telling you before the podcast how I'd had that issue in my shoulder, and I went for 3 visits, and that was it. And it's not my chiropractor has never been a person that's like, hey, let me prescribe you. Like somebody told me the other day, like, yeah, my chiropractor told me 15 visits. He's prescribed me 15 visits. I think that's bullshit. but my chiropractor's like, hey, if come back if you need it. But I mean, like, from all the grappling and training, just like there are herniations that happen, and I believe you can control them with things like massage therapy, chiropractic care, nutrition, things with anti-inflammatory properties, glucosamine, fish oils, MSM is something. I do stuff called Blue Emu. These are all great topical and internal treatments. But I'm pretty open-minded and some of it, even if it's placebo effect. But I just kind of like, I don't like that he's been as critical as he has been about chiropractic care, because I see that like people have pulled a clip out, and I haven't seen it, like his like thing. It's popping up on my YouTube all the time, just being like Joe Rogan blast chiropractic, which that's not really the question. The question is, what if that's I know that you've done some training with Reiki, and you've talked about your guy, and like, what's your take on people that would be critical of that? Or like, what would you say to people that don't know what it is?
So a lot of people can't, like, when you talk about a Reiki master, many people can achieve a rank of master. It's just like a black belt, bro. You can have a black belt in some programs without really being a black belt, and that's just my take on how I feel.
Yeah, no, I mean, they're handing out 2-year black belts in karate and taekwondo. I mean, it's a lot. It doesn't mean what it once did, or what a lot of people. I feel like the black belt embodies in the general mind of like normal people. How they think about it is not really what it is for a lot of traditional martial arts.
When we look at Reiki in general, kind of massage in general, also the way it's presented, the way practitioners actually are, it's hard to not have that stereotype when you're looking at a bunch of people who are so far out, people who are just, like living an unbelievable life almost. So what I would tell people is that somewhere between The Secret, the book, and Lifestyle, where we each make our own reality, and complete atheism is the truth. There is a universal type of connection. Everything that we look at in this third dimension is built in diagrams, and it's broken down by our brain, and everything is broken down to binary, all of our senses. And pretty much, not to be too corny, but Luke, what he described was pretty spot on. When you look at the force that is in between life and death, the thing that actually is compelling everything to take the next step, because even what we consider death of a physical body is not the death of the particulates even, but the energy within us, the consciousness that seems to have epoched with the human. There's no proof that that ends. There's no proof that that ends. And when we look at science, science is supposed to be the experience of each of us is the most important thing, and that's only been depopularized for the last 200 years, say 150, 200 years, maybe a little bit more since about the 1500, the original awakening, and all the different looks at science that were coming up at the time. But even when we look at people like Descartes, even and he's a little later than that,
Father of modern philosophy,
yeah, man,
pineal gland.
He still believed in the one nous, the one intelligence. So that idea of light on water that makes up all of Taoism, yin yang, everything that martial arts is based off of. And I do believe that there are people who, walking down the street, you feel that person, you're connected with that person, and that person probably has some strong, connection with that true light, and that's what humans are. We as human beings are the only upright beings, and we don't seem to understand how important that is. Yeah, exactly. We think about our posture automatically. It's just something.
I know. I was like, man, I'm slouching.
Yeah. So, we struggle against gravity every day. I love to hear PTs talk about it. It's something that's fascinating. But the reason that what I personally do, and there's very few people that I would speak to being actually qualified and gifted at this, they've lived a long lifestyle of love, dude. They've done things, and other people way more than me, because I'm, pretty self-centered in reality. I think that they've lived a selfless life, man, and they're just in touch with things, and it doesn't really matter what church they grew up under. It so happens that most of them that I know that I would vouch for did know Christ at some point, but they are all practicing what we would consider Taoism, Buddhism, ancient thought. So.
I talked about this in my Western Civ class the other day. So the Mongols were, and my philosophy professor gave this metaphor of bear spray and believing in God. It's like, well, and I forget, he did it particularly in philosophy of religion, but and I got to hear, I took him for like 27 hours, so I got to hear him. He's like, hey, you go to the woods and you have bear spray. Otherwise you believe in God. And if there's no bears, when you die, nothing happens.
Yeah.
Not a big deal. But if you do have the bear spray, and there are bears, or there is something after you die, it's good to have the bear spray or have believed in God. That was his metaphor. He had some creative analogies that could get you to wrap your head around things like just different schools of philosophy or reason and just ethics. But that the Mongols were super tolerant of all the other religions. They had their own views, and they would move into the Middle East and China, even parts of Europe, all their peripheral, anything outside the Asian steppe that was a peripheral tribe before getting to like Russia or China. I mean, you just look at Mongolia on the map. They'd be like, hey, you telling me this is what's true? Well, that's not what I heard, but what if it is? Mm-hmm. We're going to believe that too. So like because they did that, because they were, by the time Kublai Khan comes to power from Genghis Khan, they're just like the way Marco Polo writes about the Mongols is not how I would interpret the Mongols in their rise to that point. They were just like raping and killing everybody. It is not to get into all that, but there's some crazy stories. Just listen to Dan Carlin's Hardcore History, Wrath of the Khans, parts 1 through 5, I think it is. I've recently went back through the first, 3 or 4, but Marco Polo's writing about it, just being like, man, these people are just so tolerant and everybody wants to be a part of their empire. They're so peaceful, and and there's this thing called the Pax Mongolica, which is the Mongol peace they had brought about to the entire world in a sense. But what they really did is they were just protecting the Silk Road, and not like the dark web internet Silk Road.
That's funny.
The actual old school trade routes. And when they could no longer protect that is when there became that need to find a new route to India or China. And that's what all the European monarchs were focused on during that same period of time you just mentioned a minute ago, that scientific revolution era of world history. But
it's a lot of revolution of thought born out of that, man.
Yeah, from the Renaissance or exploration, you could just say 1492 on. I mean, there's a lot of old divisions you could do, honestly. But from that point in time until World War II, I mean, because it's just one thing after another. At the turn of the century, you get Napoleon. For the 19th century, you got 20th century, maybe that you get World War I and II, which Dan Carlin does another awesome series on that, Blueprint for Armageddon, which is a lot of hours of content, but it's a worthy listen. The way he describes things is so powerful. Talks about the German army marching through Poland for like an entire day, and just like remarking on, like the first-hand accounts, like remarking on their uniforms and all these things, and how like they had an army that would pass through a town, and you would see the army come in. You're like, oh wow! And at the end of the day, it was like the tail end of the army. Yeah. Crazy. So, yeah, I don't remember why I got. The Mongols, religious toleration. Yeah, open-mindedness. Yeah, good for them.
Pretty much everywhere throughout history, when we look at peace, it is always precipitated by war, bro. And I don't care who's in charge. This is something that both sides need to recognize in our country. And the right seems to be understanding it more and have fallen into the progressive category, in my opinion. But man, when we look at strife and the things that human beings actually accomplish, you almost have to have a platform like the church to have that massive spark. And something that I would say about our country or the church in general, it's like at least we have part of our income dedicated to what we want to. There are many, many places in the world throughout world history where basically none of what you do is attributed to what you actually want. And that's why America has been great. That's why other people have come to our country and achieved what they couldn't achieve back home, man.
Yeah, for sure. So what you kind of turned me on to that TED Talk a while back. We watched that here just a few weeks ago. It was fairly interesting. I really enjoy a lot of the TED Talks. I heard that the way they do the TED Talks is super weird. Like they force you to stay in stay the night with whoever is also giving a talk that day in the same hotel. Like you can't get your own hotel room, and they're going to put you up, and it's like an experience for the speaker. But a ton of people that have been on JRE, like that Megan Phelps Roper, have given some talks that I really enjoyed. There's one the other day I saw that I hadn't seen that I was wanting to see. But anyway, periodically I enjoy watching TED Talks, and so like what and you had some cool views on that, and really they were talking about some things that you talked about way before that TED Talk was even on either one of our radars. But what the
light on water theory, man. So when we look at modern science, especially from the pre-Socratics up until basically what we would consider the 1900s, everything was based on yin and yang when we think about it. And most religions are also, whether it's Taoism, which specifically says the one begat the two begat the three. Genesis goes into the same thing. So when we look at the universe, what we have is dark matter, and then we have light. And when we say light, that is the universal, like, nous, right? That is the actual a spark that drove the world, the God particle, if you will. And when we start talking about things like the fourth phase of water and what can actually be accomplished with the worldview changing on what water is, when we think of matter is water for the most part. That's what needs to change, is that this is not real. This is not real. This is not real, bro. When we start accepting that we are a particle that assimilates matter to us, that's when when I say human, what I really mean is American, because Eastern thought understands this. The Japanese believe, I'm sorry, I say that very, very...
no, that's a generalization.
Yeah.
I get. I've talked to philosophers about the same, because I've asked...
Everything has a spirit. The sword has a spirit. As soon as you cut the pyramid of salt from its mother, mine, it has its own spirit. It becomes its own entity. And that is what needs to change in modern science. And in my opinion, see, there used to be, different classes of people who made power distribution in our country. And we talk about science having taken over to the point where ego is, no longer productive. We have science having replaced the warrior class. If you have a view that people don't agree with, the popular class doesn't agree with, and there's been a lot of social upheaval about it lately, the supposedly most open-minded people will kind of bash you for your views. And I think that when we look at what science has become, they've really destroyed a lot of their own greatest thinkers over the last, it's 500 years, 600 years now, man. People that, specifically in smaller countries, they had all these great theories and had products that would have, if their country would have accepted them, they could have maybe been on par with America, way quicker, but it just never happened. That
it's crazy if you look at England, Great Britain, the UK, how that's a tiny little island right off the coast of Europe that took over everything at one point. There's a saying that the sun never set on the British Empire, and that was true.
And that's due to their thinking. They understand that you have to have an antagonist to build off of. And I think that that's something that they adopted, probably with, I hate to sound, what's the word, overly dramatic or romanticize things, but, the Knights of the Round Table or something like that. There's some kind of ancient knowledge that was kept, and they understood that.
Well, with the fall of Rome, there was so much culture that was lost. Same thing with all the libraries that have been burned, Alexandria. It just, even in the 20th century, when Mao Zedong took over China with his revolution. But, definitely. And ironically, to me, is until even, till World War II and even beyond, the era of history that we've kind of brought into a couple of times till now, more or less, is when colonization started. That's when all of these countries set out to colonize the world, not just the region. That's like the Mongols. That's the known world to all of those people and their own reality. But, when you have Europeans going over and wiping out the Mississippian culture and Native Americans, all of those, it's like all the way until Vietnam. And Vietnam was us trying to help France regain its colony. French Indochina. And that's, so like people in history refer to that period that I'm kind of talking about, like Vietnam era, is decolonization. And it started happening before that too. later 19th century on.
Man, Vietnam blew up 10 years ago, boy. It's very successful right now, you know?
Yeah, true.
History is really divided.
Joseph Tran, do you know him from Eric's school? I call him Wesley Chow, but he's...
yes, I do.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny. I only call him Wesley Chow, but if you're listening to this, Joe, I called you Joseph Tran first on the podcast. So, but he's from Vietnam. So, I think if he's not, I hope that doesn't make me a racist. Anyway, just joking.
No, really everywhere you look, man, you know, we have from Caesar writing on it, who, you know, great source as far as the long term. They all talk about different tribes not adhering well to what we would consider civilization. And you go through, humankind makes it so much more violent than necessary, dude. We fight against self-recognition. You know, it's almost strange. Even the people in our country right now who think they're the most in touch seem to be the farthest out of touch right now. And that's what trips me out, because stereotypes are completely the opposite, and popular like science would tell us the opposite. But I think that when you look at who's actually being, you know, open-minded in our country, they are the segment that 10 years ago weren't being, you know, they were all about basically economy and things like that.
Are you familiar with the concept of a zeitgeist?
Zeitgeist, what does it mean?
So, like in a roundabout way, my whole idea in doing this podcast is to kind of get caught up a little bit more in this concept of the zeitgeist, or even create an archive of a zeitgeist, which zeitgeist literally means spirit of the times. So it's like you could only be in touch having heard all sides without forming super biased opinions. So like anybody I have on, I'm going to let them say whatever they want to say, and I'm going to say whatever I want to say. And we might even have people debate each other. You know, it's just like, I heard a rumor that Joe Rogan is going to have Neil deGrasse Tyson and Eric Dubé on at the same time.
Nice.
That would be great. And that, I feel like we need more of that. Some of the coolest stuff I ever watched, and that little circles thing on the paper I told you, that was someone, maybe it was a modern Christian guy. I can't remember what his background was, but he was debating an atheist, and he gave that analogy for potential knowledge versus actual knowledge. And fascinating. So it's like two circles on paper, and you have the guy shade in how much knowledge he thinks he has. Out of all, the circle represents all knowledge, and it's like, then you ask him the question. So the whole rest of the circle couldn't contain what you can't perceive with your mind on this topic.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's just a fascinating way to look at things. And I always try and maintain an open mind and try and think about things later, or, you know, just, I hate just being closed off to certain ideas based off, preconceptions or things that, like, I mean, it's just like, I'm always trying to rewire things that, yeah, like just snap points of view you develop over your lifetime without really even, it's like almost like when you somebody asks you something, it's like, hey Brian, you want to go get something to eat? And I'm like, what? And I heard you say, do you want to go get something to eat? But I said what? Like I didn't. And then you repeat yourself. Like, it's like I've cued in on that over the years and like tried to like reduce it, but it's just like, it's like habitual. So it's like, how many other just kind of knee slap responses do we have to situations, to comments, to views, where it's like, I think let's just like, having heard all like that Mongolian approach, just look, all sides could be right. We're not saying we're right. We're just saying, if you don't join us, we're going to kill you.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was the one thing about it. It's like, you didn't have a choice, unfortunately, to be a part of the empire. It's crazy. There's one story where like, they lined everybody up like next to a wagon wheel, and if you were taller than the wagon wheel, you got your head cut off.
Wow.
Yeah, like this like single file line. They had this systematized, mechanized.
Wow.
That back on Dan Carlin, he calls he calls people like Julius Caesar, Mao Zedong, Genghis Khan, historical arsonists or creative destroyers. Because a lot of times in history, people look at them as like, yeah, like I'm saying with the Mongol peace and Kublai Khan, it's like when you view the, like on that book, even right there on my table, when you view what they have to say about it, you don't get the Holocaust of 20 to 50 million people that they laid upon the region in just a short amount of time. I mean, he took over the entire Middle East in 3 years.
Wild.
Yeah, in the most vile ways possible. And one thing, it's very unfortunate, but Dan Carlin goes into rape a lot, and I'm talking about that. And when I hit on Spain and exploration, Columbus's voyages, because
genealogy is a very big deal.
Yeah. That's like Genghis Khan, like I think father to son has more kids or more people in Asia. 1 in 500 males in Asia can directly trace their lineage. Genghis Khan. There's all these stats out there on it. You can look them up. But fascinating. I really enjoy that podcast, and I really enjoy studying the Mongols. But I would like to either take or even eventually offer a class on it, but you just don't, like, even in either one of these books, these are both really good books on world history, but you're just not going to get it in there. You gotta, and there's only a few sources, like you really got to dig in the historiography of what the Middle Eastern historians and Muslim historians had to say about the Mongols as they were, because the Mongols, they had this history that came out later called The Secret History of the Mongols, but so little is known about that era. I mean, it's kind of like the Old Testament is written way after, or based off oral traditions, and but there are a lot of accounts that kind of match up, and it's kind of like Egyptology. That views on that are changing all the time. As we would tell, Napoleon went to Egypt and found the Rosetta Stone and brought it back, and we were able to, over time, translate that back to a Ptolemaic. So like Dan Carlin calls Alexander the Great a historical arsonist. So Alexander the Great takes over the whole world in a very similar fashion, or that known world is Genghis Khan, very similar. And they took over a lot of the same regions too. But when he gets to Egypt, he installs like his own generals there, the Ptolemies, Ptolemy, I believe. And they kind of make this, and this is post New Kingdom, but they kind of make this new melding of cultures between Greek culture and Egyptian culture, and everything that they had also absorbed from the whole region, all the campaigns.
All of the early scientists traveled to the east.
Yeah. Even Plato. Plato went to Egypt. And that's fascinating. I love. Joe Rogan's done some podcasts where people have really delved into. I want to say Graham Hancock even goes into it, but super fascinating. And they were able to. There's like a Ptolemaic form of Greek, Egyptian, Greco-Egyptian, I don't even know how you would say it, but it would just say Ptolemaic language, and it was kind of a melding of the two languages as I understand it. And I may be butchering this, but this is how I understand it. They were able to go, so you can't translate hieroglyphics at this time, so they were able to take the writing on this stone that had hieroglyphics, and then this sort of Egyptian Greek language, and then they translated it back. So, but you're still going over like that middle language. It's like you're going to lose. It's like the tin can game. You're going to lose some of it along translation. Like the Old Testament, like it's really written well, but it's based a lot of the earlier books. I know for a fact, having looked this up not too long ago. And looked into it a little bit, are based off like 800 years of oral traditions written after the fact, which, I'm not devaluing that in any way, but I think it's really important to understand the history on stuff like that before really offering a lot of like that's why I was saying before we started, I think it's important that you give people all sides. If we're talking about the theoretical model of the Earth's crust, maybe we should be talking about that hole in the I guess it's in Russia or Siberia, but
I think the Russians drilled it in
Russians,
Antarctica.
yes, the Russians drilled it, but it wasn't in like, central Russia.
Yeah.
But fascinating to read about what they encountered at what depths and how that doesn't really match up with what we think the Earth is doing underneath us. So I think I think more and more over the last few years, things are being presented in that way, but not universally speaking. I think having heard some of the earlier history on some of the people, like in the Darwinian sort of era, that kind of developed and formed other legs of science in the post-scientific revolution world. I'm talking like mid-1800s, earlier 1800s, for example. I can't remember their names without having them in front of me, but the early scientists that came up with found the first dinosaur bones and things of that nature. It's like, hey, here's 9 teeth, and this is what it would look like. Yeah. And then moving forward, that became the basis of understanding as we know it.
To kind of further what I was building on earlier, when you talk about the Rogan podcast, remember how they play the audio clip of the dude kind of denouncing the people who talk about dinosaurs, and the dinosaur expert on Rogan's show is getting
personal attack.
If he was here, I'd be kicking his ass.
Blah. Yeah, I do remember. The guy's a paleontologist.
You talk about Alex Jones getting hit in the back of the head while at the same time simultaneously saying the word, dumbass or whatever it was, they're throwing at him. Yeah, dude, you get such a myopic view of the world right now, and I understand. Like, I came from a pretty progressive school in that, the Phoenix, Arizona guys. We had a good Channel 8. My dad worked for Honeywell, Sperry, Allied Signal. I got a lot of theoretical physics, a lot of Doctor Who type stuff in my life, and I gotta say that the things that were theorized, we could make a list if you want, go through his Google nerd trip real quick, but what I'm saying is true, man. There are so many things that were theorized over the years, and people who've been blackballed from science, and specifically, like you said, Egyptology. There was, a lot of knowledge built in the Eastern culture that's been passed on to the Western.
The amount of knowledge that's been lost is, if you were to survey the libraries that were burned, and the regions that were set on fire by people like Genghis Khan or the Crusades, and all that was lost, there's no telling. And that's why I want to, and even in history, I maintain a very open mind, and it's not like I'm going around thinking, or like with like ancient aliens, ancient astronaut theorists believe, but I am open to the fact that what we know and what's happened in the last couple 150 years, and how we've gone from wagon wheel to this podcast technology and these cool salt lamps and whatever, everything that your iPhone, your Android. That's a big deal. That's a big jump forward. And that's just because of things like computers, microchips, and advances in technology. There's been all of these societies that Graham Hancock is big on that have been found, and they're starting to be believed. A lot of his narratives starting to be accepted in the historical community. They found all sorts of underwater, like an underwater sphinx even in Abu Qir Bay, which ironically, Napoleon fought a naval battle when he went and got the Rosetta Stone in Abu Qir Bay. Wow. So, but there's been all of this.
Yeah, the Indus River Valley.
Yeah, which is the Nile changes over time, and that area used to be like where Giza's at. And beyond that, in Abu Qir Bay, that used to be probably where the town that is on the other side of the Giza. Where the 3 Great Pyramids are, that probably used to be moving out forward. But it's like they probably had technologies that we can only speculate about that might have sent their civilization in a totally different direction for a few hundred years. Whether it was had to do with, I know there's a lot of really fascinating we talked about light earlier, but how the Egyptians harnessed light and were able to light the insides of dark rooms and things based off of reflections.
I'd like to introduce something else into American thought. What actually creates electrical currents, right? Fluid flow creates electrical currents. It's one of those things that if you ran the river of the Nile, that volume of water over something that's built out of the stone that, conductive stone of the pyramids, and then plus they had it covered and sealed for the most part. So it was actually probably was, wow, I totally blanked the word, but anyways, it doesn't allow electrical flow. You were channeling the water's flow potential through the pyramid, and it was actually probably moving energy to other parts of the pyramid.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, see, there's and I'm actually going to look up this dude's name, because there's a guy, as I understand it, in Egyptology, and he's in like every History Channel documentary ever. And I want to look up and see what his name is. Oh, Hawass.
Now,
Zahi Hawass. And I feel like that he's kind of like pigeonholing information and preventing people from delving further in, because he's holding on to the current narrative of what we know. Well, we know everything, or that can't be true because we know this. And that I feel like that you get people like that in power, like Michael Booty and I just did a podcast on the Drive-By Truckers on Friday, which I haven't put up yet. I'm editing a lot of pictures and lyrics and stuff into it for the audience, some for YouTube. But there's like, when we saw him, Cooley is one of their front men. They have two front men, and Patterson Hood, that song I was reading you about, George Wallace, he is one of the front man. This Cooley is the other front man. And at the show, he's like, I love my grandparents, but due to advances in modern medicine, our grandparents just keep living a whole lot longer. And you can't just keep outliving your grandparents. You got to outvote them too. Like, that's what he said. They're like a super politically charged band, you could say. But he was just like, you can't just sit around and wait on stuff like this to die out. That is the stifles progress. But you can't just come along and annihilate it either. It's there, like you're saying with yin and yang. It's like there's a balancing of perspectives. If there's just an open-minded approach, I feel like, you're going to have views, I'm going to have views, but if I personally attack you, which is like one of the most blatant fallacies that we could create, or an argument gets heated, which it's so easy to do that. Like, I've even done that, not recently, but somebody was just kind of like stating some points that I just thought to be, I'm like, well, do you know about this or that? What about this? And I don't even, like, in hindsight, I'm like, why did I do that? Why did I even bring that up? Like, why did I want to, like, because I pretty much like started trying to goad them into arguing, because they didn't have really any facts to present. And I was presenting facts, and what I perceived to be facts, or thought to be facts. And then afterwards, I was like, man, that kind of personally attacked their viewpoint. And I felt bad about it, because that's not who I'm trying to be. I'm trying to be a balanced perspective, but also, like, I like playing devil's advocate for people that they don't balance the perspectives. Like, well, that's what I learned in elementary school. Well, that's what it's like. Well, I tell people this frequently. I graduated high school in 2006, and I got out of high school not knowing anything about the Vietnam War, other than my grandpa had a son that died in the Vietnam War. Like, that's really it. Like, I knew it was a thing, but like, it wasn't talked about. And like, now I know exactly why. Now I know about the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. Now I know a lot about Vietnam that would, in a roundabout way, shake my belief system. But and so, like, it's almost like choosing to omit. And I feel like that kids are getting out of school learning more about it, and I realize that also Vietnam is a newer thing to be analyzing. There's a lot of sources that have come out even since I've been out of high school. But I feel like that there's almost like for the means of patriotic indoctrination, I guess you could say, that there's a lot of things that are omitted. You know, like, so Cora asked me the other day, she was like reading some article or something, and she's like, who do you think the top 3 worst American presidents were? And I was like, Andrew Jackson. And she was like, no, he's number 5 or something like that. But, you know, I'd feel like going through high school and even some of my like survey general education stuff, once I started getting to upper level, it just depends on who you took for what. You started to see that Andrew Jackson maybe wasn't the nicest dude. And it's fascinating to me through the revision of history how people get painted as like the Mandela effect. It's like,
That's funny.
yeah, I mean, that's a great example. It's like, hey, you know, this guy was a murdering rapist, but look at all this good that he achieved. That's why I'm really fascinated how Dan Carlin calls that. I'm going to use that in my lectures and when I think and learn about history going forward about these people that they're a monarch or they're a whatever, but they are creative destroyer, like a historical arsonist, a Hitler, a Stalin. I mean, the list goes on. You could pick and choose. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so real quick, I'm going to say some things, and I want everyone to understand that I've got a really good track record. I deal with a lot of doctors. I've dealt with a lot of psychologists. I deal with a lot of people who are actually really in touch with themselves and have great reputations. So understand when I say this, I'm not a crazy man. You know, this is something that there's a lot of background for. So, what we're dealing with in our country as far as the big issues like social justice, like paying too much for Medicare and things like that, you know, all of our little expenses that are kind of causing controversy. When we look at our culture, the best thing we can do is preventative, you know, get rid of all the foods that were made during World War I and World War II, all of the canned foods that were made for, you know, people who were basically fighting wars and ended up becoming part of our population. We need to eat more what we would consider the paleo diet, you know, just.
Man, I have, you know, because I live out on a hill out here,
Yeah.
and I've thought about doing like some, what are they called? They're like almost like
Like what the Greeks had, dude.
yeah, stepped off. I mean, several cultures have done this on like hillsides and stuff, but the Incas did it. But it's basically like a raised garden or flower bed, but you can kind of do them on a hill and step them off. Do like one up here and one down here. I can't remember the
If
exact.
I remember all the names for everything that
I
I've
know,
heard.
dude. Yeah, this is too much in the brain going on for us. I mean, I'm trying to do a podcast on King Arthur and 1968 later. I've got to think about that stuff too. You know, people just have to understand.
Yep. We need to understand that our culture is getting materialistic to the point where we don't have the same value to human contact. You know, we aren't
Totally
comfortable,
agreed.
yeah, with casual social contact like many other cultures are. You know, when we're pushing our way through a crowd in a crowded city, Americans don't seem to have the same joyousness and jubilation as some other countries when you push through their crowded streets. You know, so it's an attitude of more selfishness and more basically bringing things unto ourselves, and that is what the essence of materialism is. So we, as a culture, when we want to start, you know, saving money and actually trimming our debt, we have to accept that, you know, doctors are imperfect, our medical system is imperfect, we're going to learn things as we go along, and there's no justification to charge people what is actually being charged for prescriptions and medical care.
Have I told you about my health insurance?
No, I saw a quick look
Yeah.
at it, man.
So, well, we're making some changes, and some of them have to do with exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But since, so like, you know, I've been with my wife for several years, but we just got married just a little over a year
Yeah,
ago.
a little over here.
So I guess this October will be 2 years. Last October was 1 year. But we've been together for several years. But since we got married and since I turned 30 and since she turned 25, that all kind of coincided with in like 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
My health insurance gone up over 300%.
Whoa.
Yes. From like, I paid, when I got married, I was paying like a little, like $109 a month or something. Now we pay $5. So now, but we're just going to there's a lot of things we can do to, like, I'm going to raise my deductible a little bit. Cora's going to get on her own plan. After when enrollment opens back, I'm going to get on my own plan. We're going to kind of set up another little, sort of a fund where we pay into it. Like we're going to, I mean, there's a lot of other ways to go about it other than this traditional system you look at. And really, I don't know if it was you were saying or someone I was talking to within the last couple of days was talking about how it's like what we need doctors for more than anything is trauma care.
Yeah, trauma care, exactly.
Like when you broke your arm.
Exactly.
Like accidents happen, man.
When I say things like what I'm saying, I hope the Americans understand that, man. I speak from someone who I only have my career because of doctors, because of a plastic surgeon. So yeah, when we get preventative care to the point that we're eating healthy and we're comfortable being stretched out by someone to, alleviate our pain and understand that our body is a projection of our mind at the very least, our somato-emotional is real at the very least, we need to accept that. And understand that we have pools of energy in our body, much like the Mormons would believe that we have different parts of our body. Ancient Easterns and many cultures believe that we have different parts in our body. Sociology. No,
Sociologist.
Tom Cruise's
Scientologist. Every time I say Scientologist on this podcast, I'm like, are they going to be watching me?
Yeah, it's weird.
Dude, I just recently rewatched the Leah Remini JRE, and then the Ron Miscavige one came on right after that. But I am fascinated by that whole culture and how, like, if I want to do like a series on the podcast on my history Unraveled, where I kind of talk about like Westboro Baptist Church, Scientology, a lot of maybe Aleister Crowley, just a lot of sort of last couple 100 years of history for some really wild and out there thoughts and ideas.
Okay, so to build on that process that you were talking about with your chiropractor, how they want to see you for a certain number of visits, I personally don't believe in things like that. If you have 3 or 4 visits with a chiropractor and you think that it's healthy and you're getting along, that's good.
I don't think I've ever gone more than like that 3 times.
Yeah, exactly.
It just and 2, it was weird. After the second visit, I went back up to the first and I told him, I was like, after I left, like, and Derek, like one of our really good friends who gave me this chessboard, is in chiropractic school right now, but he was kind of explaining it to me, but like it was all in my neck and collarbone. Yeah. And he lightly, I mean, it was like going to a PT session, put me on the TENS unit and the ice, and they did this little ultrasound. They like put this jelly on like my neck back here between my shoulders and like rubbed it on there. And it was, it felt great. Like it alleviated a lot of tension and pain. And I mean, a lot of that is very helpful too. And then they really kind of prepped me, and he did a very gentle alignment on me. But then I started noticing something in my rib, like back here in my back. And it was just like almost taking my breath away. And I mentioned that to him last time, and he aligned me, went through the kind of the PT stuff at the beginning, and then he really the next alignment was just like a lot of relief, but still a little bit in that one area. And after the 3rd time, I left there pain-free. And other than just like I told you, I'd been off and like I got the flu over the break, and then had a little like possibly like a not necessarily like a staph infection. I caught it way early, but I got scratched 2 different places in 1 week. I mean, we're big on like hygiene and stuff at the gym, but man, when you get scratched, that staph underneath fingernails, and you can't do a whole lot about that. There's no amount of mopping the mats. And 2, then you got to preach to, and we have signs like trim your freaking fingernails.
Trim your fingernails.
But then 2, here's another thing: trim your fingernails, and then you don't wash your hands. Go read into that a little bit. Like your nail bed is.
You have to file it down and wash. And I even use a little alcohol on the clippers before I use them most of the time, man, because you never know.
Have you ever had a manicure?
Yeah, a pedicure too, man.
So manicure on the toes?
Pedicure is on the toes.
Okay,
yeah.
that's what I want. I want one for the feet.
if we as Americans were getting pedicured and getting our feet rubbed and blah 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 all the time, like instead of investing millions of dollars in treating things that already exist, we should just put some people who are actually great therapists into their niche and let them take care of people's feet, let them take care of people's necks. Now, to put out a thought on what was said earlier, like, Rogan got on one topic as far as that girl dying on the chiropractic table. Now, every human body is different.
Was that an infant? Was that a child?
No, she was a model. She was an adult, dude. And they might have mentioned an infant also.
That's what I've heard him come out big time against, which I can understand that,
dude,
to an extent.
Every human body is different. It has its own
Agreed.
Total deviations. There are actually people who have ribs on their upper vertebrae, on their cervicals, man. So that's why x-rays and things like that are important, and when you start talking about chiropractics and myself, man, I've worked on a ton of different people who I probably was pushing boundaries as far as working with the neck. And it's all about focus and concentration and focusing on what you're trying to achieve and letting that person walk through their emotion. But when you're a chiropractor and you just pick someone up and you pop something, dude,
I will say that's a big difference, man. When you work on me, it's kind of like we're working together in a way.
Exactly.
Like I have to fit I've been doing yoga too, more and it's still like I stretch a lot, but man, it's different, and all of this kind of is different and the same, but like I have to focus on not pushing back. I have to focus on that in like everything I do, really. Jiu-Jitsu, yoga practice, holding stretches, gaining flexibility, massage. But chiropractor is kind of different, but that's like, I feel like why they go through all this preliminary relaxation.
Yeah, most chiropractors will work in, they read the map of your body, quote unquote.
Well, my guy's done grappling before too for several years while he was in college, and he's so personable. And like, I mean, like I turned him on to Widespread Panic, which turned me on. Yeah, we went to Memphis in May together, Widespread Panic, which we were talking about that, fond memories there as well of Jimmy Herring cheese grating our face off into the fourth dimension. Yeah. But that's why my really good friend is there right now, and watching him play in Mexico, Colby. And he's just been blowing me up, telling me all about it. This 2 out of 4 nights have happened already. So when he gets back, I'm going to make him come on the podcast and do a Panic in La Playa Unraveled. So, but man, I'm wanting to go see Panic again. I've been jonesing to see Panic. What did you think about Panic?
I had a great time, man.
That was a blast, bro.
To put it in perspective for everyone, like I got to see this unique kind of dark side of Panic. Everyone was in black and
bluesy.
Yeah, super bluesy.
Dude, I felt like John Bell like embodied in some sort of strange way like every Memphis icon ever up there, but also like he just had kind of this, I mean, he was wearing a sort of like a green plaid checkered suit with like some black cowboy boots or something on, but just like they just brought it down and dirty and grimy. They played Me and the Devil Blues. They got real bluesy that night, but they also played some of their classic Vic Chestnut songs. You didn't get to hear him play, so check this out. I think I told you when I saw him at Panic in La Playa last year, they closed one night with they had these 2 songs, Protein Drink and Sewing Machine. And they're actually a song by Vic Chestnut, and it was written by this guy who's paralyzed, and he had some like feeling in his neck and arms so he could strum the guitar. Yeah. So like all the members of Panic except for Sonny Ortiz, the bongo player, were in a band with Vic Chestnut and John Bell called Brute. So like Panic plays this song Sleeping Man. Remember the song that Dave Schools played? You're a sleeping man. And I don't remember the lyrics word for word, but I do like it, and it's one of the ones that their bass player sings, but it's a Vic Chestnut song. But the other night they opened the first song, so like when I saw them last year, they closed night 3 with Protein Drink, and it's like it's a 2-part song.
Yeah, you told me they opened the next show with
Sewing Machine. Because like right where Protein Drink ends is the start of Sewing Machine.
Just a blur and dove right in.
Oh, well, so that's what they did with set 1 on night one the other night with Colby, they opened with Protein Drink and they closed with Sewing Machine. They did Protein Drink and To Climb to Safety, probably two of my favorite Panic songs ever. And then when I saw them at Rogers a couple years ago, they came to the Walmart, the amp up there. For those of you listening, we came up with Walmart right here in Arkansas. Okay, that's our claim to fame. And they have a cool amphitheater that they bring awesome bands like Widespread Panic in. And it's actually the first place I saw Panic, like 2013, I believe. But
that was not long ago. You've racked up some Panic time.
Yeah, I think I've seen them 9 times total. But I mean, that one was like I saw them 4 nights in a row, so it's not. So 4, 5, 6. I guess it's 8 times, 7, 8 times. Anyway, and I've missed them a couple of times, and I'm missing them right now. But they just really bring it, man, and they're such an incredible band. But yeah, and then Brute and Vic Chestnut. If you haven't listened to any of those guys, look into them. Yeah, so we're definitely, I'm going to do Music Unraveled on just Widespread Panic. I end up probably talking about them every podcast because I just love them that much. Mm-hmm. And I tell people this, Booty and I were talking about this when we did our Music Unraveled. It's like, no one knows who they are. Just like when Colby turned me on to Joe Bonamassa. Yeah. I know who Joe Bonamassa was. Now I'm sharing his videos on Facebook every day. And you went to Joe Bonamassa concert with him. What'd you think about that?
Bro, there have been very few times in my life that my mind has actually been blown, but the entire band, bro, it was just pristine, dude. It was something that I will remember forever. The night was a blessing. It was like love was poured into me by that crowd, bro. And it was an intimate show. They didn't even sell upper deck seating for that show. Like we got like lower bowl seating, I believe. But dude, that's it. Like I would say like probably 3 of the best shows I've ever been to are when we saw the Floozies and Sun Squabby, who are coming back here in just a couple of months. I'm telling you right now, they are incredible. Yeah. Get out and see them right now.
Oh my gosh, man! And I mean, they're from this region. I mean, Kansas City. They're 5 hours away, so they play in this area all the time. They played. They just played a 2-night show this weekend, which I did not go to, but I've seen them twice, and I'm going to see them play with Sun Squabby and STS9, Andy Frasco, and some people here in April. So I'm looking forward to that. And I've been talking about it. As soon as Colby gets back into town, I'm going to get him and Booty on the podcast at the same time too. And we've all got a list of all these concerts we went to in 2017. A lot of them we went to together, like, you know, like me, you and Colby went to this one or whatever. And we're just going to be like, how awesome was that? Tell me about this. So just bringing up all the memories, man, you know, like it's such good times. I mean, cause dude, I will say those Panic and Bonamassa shows, for sure. I mean, Floozies when we went, that was like a couple of years ago.
Oh, actually, tonight's the other supermoon night, bro.
Interesting. Yeah, that is true.
Harvest moon, blue moon, whatever. Or not harvest moon, I'm sorry, blue moon.
Yeah, did you ever see that Family Guy rendition of Star Wars? I think it was called Harvest Moon, wasn't it? Or Blue Harvest or something like that. It was so funny.
Harvest, yeah.
Oh, man. All of the Star Wars renditions they've done on Family Guy were funny.
So, let me finish this thought real quick. So when we look at our reality and the third dimension, think of it like exactly like what Disney portrayed in Star Wars. When Rey was getting in touch with things, like she saw everything, right? And then the next sequence is actually very specific, man. She goes into that place where she was tempted, right? And it's water. She falls straight into the water. Yeah, and there were vines, you know. And when we look at, like, for instance, the 2 serpents intertwining themselves on a pole, you know, this is the double helix is something we see all throughout nature and the human history. So she falls into this water, you know, blackness. She goes into this place that's basically black, and she's in the 4th dimension, right? And so she snaps, and this snap just goes bam, 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 and it reverberates through what we would consider time, right? So
fascinating.
Yeah.
Almost all great musicians I know. Mm-hmm. I think that's what got me thinking about Widespread Panic, because like that was like some 4th dimension stuff going on when I tell that Jimmy Herring story at Panic. I mean, And they've talked about that in interviews, and a lot of musicians have. It's like sometimes when we just get up there on the stage together. John Frusciante from the Chili Peppers talks about this in the opening sequence of the documentary they came out with, the black and white one, Funky Monks, in like '90s when they were recording Blood Sugar Sex Magic. And they refer to it as a fourth dimension. They're like, it just like time that just you become the song. You're within the frequencies that you were providing. And watching Led Zeppelin play in the 70s, man, and like things that, cause like my buddy Colby was kind of talking about some of their gestures and stuff. And I've been watching some documentaries about like watching them play live. Like they are in the groove.
They're
like
very much making a trance, dude.
Yes.
You know, Heron references a couple times being an alien, being thousands of years old, bro. And I think that that's something else humans need to look into, dude, because, especially because of the gender fluidity, you know, identification thing, is that what if you've lived 20 lives, or maybe not that many lives, maybe more like, you know, 13, 14, like
it's fascinating the number of religions that believe in like a lot of past lives. Like the Scientology, for example, is big into the past lives things, but they're so big into it that at a certain point I've heard a lot of the celebrities that defected, like it lost them because they're like, not only but you past life, but it was on another planet and that planet was overpopulated, so Xenu, the intergalactic overlord.
So that it's a trip, but man, when people who I really respect because of my years of life experience, when they talk about these other dimensions or the fourth dimension, like our Earth, quote unquote, like our Milky Way galaxy, this particular gravitational field that we're in, so time space field, is very unique, and it can apparently accommodate all kinds of different beings, dude, things that we wouldn't even think of, like not just humans, you know. So we're unique. And it's crazy to me that there's so many coincidences. Like we are somehow at the middle of the universe, even though we aren't, you know, we are not the center of our galaxy. We still are located magically at the middle of this totally chaotic universe, you know. And there's 10 billion things you could go off on in that thread, you know. But we are just such like we are driving a machine. We are driving a what's the word? An avatar. We're driving an avatar, you know?
It's like your body's a vehicle for experiences.
Yeah. Elon Musk said at this the world leadership thing, he said, if there was one thing I could tell you, every leader of the world, to understand, you need to understand the nature of physics. Not every equation, but you need to understand the thought process behind physics. And the reason for
Which
that,
blows my mind.
Yeah, dude. But it's really not that complicated, you know. When we think of an atom, there isn't two, you know, say two electrons floating around. There's actually a cloud where the electron could be, and the probability of that electron's presence is something that the human seems to have some kind of determination over, whether it's a physical, you know, I can levitate a pan or bend a spoon, or whether it's you just are connected with someone you love and you know what they're feeling even though you aren't with them. There's some kind of, I don't know, outside knowledge or group knowledge, something. So when I preach about, you know, where we should be as a civilization, we need to be light-bearing beings, man. And light-bearing beings respect other light. Namaste is all about the light within me respects the light within you. And just our culture, you know, it's like when I'm on the mat with my friends who are quote-unquote knuckleheads, you know, by societal standards, there's way more love and mutual respect for people who are of every deviation, dude. You could have, you know, a mental handicap or physical handicap.
Yeah, it's like you almost recapture that tribal essence in the gym.
Yeah, exactly. You know, a pecking order is something that I don't think needs to be established when you're out going to a concert or when you're, you know, in a group setting all the time. But I do think that when you get down to tasks, you know, task cohesion as opposed to group cohesion, it takes all kinds, man, and things are going to work themselves out, you know. And people who cry about it and see everything as an aggression. It's like, I'm telling you, hypersensitivity and this ego of holding on to things that, it's a lot of people who are teaching, they are reading things and they haven't seen things firsthand, where they're,
Yeah, and it's so easy to complain, man, and the fact that I heard someone say this, it's not, things aren't harder, they're more complex.
Yeah.
Things are hard because of the complexities of society and norms, and but they're definitely like things for all, like my grandparents were hard, right? That
could you imagine how daunting it would be to try to be a lead mind in something like archaeology right now, or and pretty much anything, mathematics? You have to be so smart.
Man, I felt like I had to get a master's degree. I felt like I was, which I didn't really. I use it now, but I didn't use it for a few years, but I felt like it was I couldn't teach any college classes if I would have got out with just my history degree. I would be unemployable virtually. I would have some interesting facts I could talk about on this podcast. But having gone through grad school made me employable at university level, doing things like general education courses and some courses within my field of expertise beyond that. But it is fascinating to me that I felt like I had to go do that because how competitive things are. Yeah. And I'm going to end up getting my PhD someday, but it's like I mean, like I crave knowledge. I'm always studying and researching the things that I enjoy.
I want to hear maybe not every aspect on things, but I want to hear the opposing sides, man.
Yeah.
It's good stuff, man.
That's why, I feel like, there's a lot of politics and division and gripes and complaints in martial arts and traditional versus modern. And it's like, the reason that is, man, is because those people are practitioners. They're not historians. They don't know the history, and their history is biased to the extent.
There are only so many Dan Carlins out there, bro.
Yeah, and it's like, and what's fascinating about that is that Dan Carlin is a journalist.
Yeah.
Just like Graham Hancock's a journalist.
Yeah, so was Lee Strobel, bro.
Yeah. Fascinating.
When, doggone, dude, there was okay, so... yeah, Elon Musk said that, and there was something else I wanted to say, bro, and I can't think about it, so I'll address it in the future. It's not that big.
Yeah, there was a moment.
Wait,
okay, go ahead.
I got it. So one of those TED Talks is by, on the fourth phase of water, the TED Talk on the fourth phase of water is by a cat who is doing craniosacral massage. Now, when I'm kind of gently just holding your head and you feel like your body starts vibrating or rotating, or you might feel like you actually felt the bones of your skull move, different pressures within your face.
Let me tell you something real quick on that. My dad was in the hospital last week in ICU, and his blood pressure got up to 234 over 138. And he kept complaining about his head hurting. Yeah. And kept complaining about his stomach hurting. They got his nausea under control, and then he had this horrible indigestion along with his head hurting. He'd just thrown up so much. Like, his symptoms got out of control. We were super, super worried and super fortunate that he just like his meds got out of. He's taken blood pressure meds forever, but they swapped his meds a couple years ago, and he hadn't really been monitoring it because all his life you take the meds, you're fine, and, within reason, it kept it under control. And I only ever remember one other time where it kind of got high, and it was just like he was alarmed about it, but it's not like symptoms or going to hospital. It's just like, his face is a little red. But they wheeled him down to give him a CT scan because they're worried. They're like, we have this for liability reasons. I have to make sure he didn't have a stroke or has a blood clot or something. But he just kept complaining about his head like hurting super bad, and that's like, I'll rub Cora in that same spot if she has like a headache or something, and like the physiological response that he was putting off just from me, because I just kind of put his weight in my hand and lifted it up, and he was just like literally his shoulders,
And that's the thing about therapy. It's not only about touch and the actual measurable things. A lot of it is just presence. But yeah, exactly like what you were saying, dude. We were taught 5 grams of pressure for craniosacral, and the natural effect of having your head held and having your back held or shoulder,
You
whatever
know
you're
what I
doing.
show people all the time that you showed me, and I consider it a lower back traction is like when you like take one of my, like I'm on my belly and you take one of my legs like right up above my knee and my like where my shin's at, and you
Yeah,
kind of lift it up.
yeah.
I've been having people do this to me and doing this to people, and just and my chiropractor's done it to me before, but they're on their belly just picking both their legs up and letting them hang.
Yeah, you did that,
Oh
dude. I
man,
remember, bro.
it feels so good. And that
And
yoga wheel in there.
that's hyperextension of the hips, and so that is kind of the opposite of our normal posture, which is kind of a slouch. So yeah, it's you're opening your hip flexors and being tall, which is what the ancients have talked about for a long time, dude. Just being open and stretching open as opposed to always forward folding and things like that. But
It is
it
crazy
feels
how we
great,
just
dude.
collapse in on ourselves over
Yeah,
time.
people, and I think that the mind has a lot to do with it. People who kind of hold themselves to a lot of restrictions as far as what they allow themselves to do with their body, they have a more of a tendency towards stagnation and things like
It is crazy because, I mean, you've worked on me a lot. I don't know how many times, probably what, 15, 20 times,
Yeah, more,
I would say,
20.
yeah, in the neighborhood at least. And it is weird how like I picked up on things. It's like I am not by any sense of the means able to achieve on any level, but like I've remarked on just different things that you've done, like having 3 points of contact versus
Yeah,
two.
yeah,
Yeah, like particularly that very first day you worked on me, you had like right here on my ulnar nerve while you were massaging my forearm, but you had your elbow in my palm and
yeah,
it just felt like there was like literal like garbage leaving my palm where your elbow was at. Like
yeah.
it was like I've like literally perceived there was like negative tension was going down my arms. Like I never felt anything like that, and that being, there's like, I guess a pressure point or something here in your palm, and you can feel it feels good when I push on it.
Yeah.
But that, and then I massage this ulnar nerve on people when they, like guys telling you Vince is like his elbow's all locked out, but that ulnar nerve will get tight on me too, and I notice it. But like, and when people are like, oh, my arm got hyperextended, that region is super tense. I've had golfer's elbow in the past and have figured out ways to pop my elbows, but man, it's like that was really like, and I'll say this, I had that golfer's elbow really bad, and I mean I still have a little occasional problems with my elbows, but not anything like
Yeah,
a couple of
exactly.
years ago.
Man, I'm telling you, I've had things that bothered me ever since childhood, or even after massage school when I I lived with massage therapists afterwards, and I've had a lot of friends in the circle that had a lot of things worked out. Distance Reiki from my Reiki master, who was 1,700, 1,800 miles away, took away more pain, and exactly like what you were describing, it felt like there was a path. Like I felt my Reiki master holding my hand, dude, from long distance away, and I felt this bleeding of energy, like things that I just didn't want, stress or tension. And afterwards, I've never had the same level of pain, bro. And my bodywork game has stepped up incredibly as far as just listening, my ability to listen.
Yeah, I mean, and two, I don't care what you believe. It's like it's based off of personal experience, and all I can do is talk about how crazy that was and how it blew my mind, and how I'd previously I wasn't into massage therapy. Like I thought it was just like a commercialized. It's like, oh yeah, people can just go to school and blah blah
Yeah.
blah. But I just think that's the way it is round here,
Yeah.
around these parts.
I don't know though, because when I look at the country, see, this is something that I'm really progressive on. I think that prostitution should be legal in a responsible format. I think that if you advertise massage and you are running, sex trafficking slaves or just straight prostitution, you need to be prosecuted under some extra kind of special thing, like you have to have a license to be a
Yeah, I
therapist.
mean,
And
dude, isn't it crazy how that idea of a happy ending is directly associated with massage therapy? I was thinking
yeah,
about that the other day. That's
I mean,
like almost just a running joke.
there are 20 apps where if you're driving across the country, you're like, oh man, where's the next rub and tug? So it is what it is. It's human nature. But much
Crazy.
like much like I couldn't walk in and hold your dad's head, because of the system and the way things are, even though if it's totally, mostly harmless, 99.9% of the time,
Yeah.
but maybe one time.
You've worked on my dad before.
Yeah, yeah. And just not being able to go and get a responsible, prostitute, because that's what you want at that point. You are a responsible American. And the things that are brought up because of that, the social issues and
I haven't really thought about that, man. You probably have to deal with that stigma.
Yeah, but also the money in our society, and all the things like prostitution and sex trade and the cops being too busy on stupid, it's sex, dude. I don't even need to touch the topic. So much has been written, move on already.
Yeah. I feel, and I mean, things like that. It's like, how effective is, if you want just to colloquially steal this, identifier, but war on prostitution, war on drugs, war on cigarettes, whatever it is, it's like, how effective is that stuff? It's just creating more criminals that we punish and clog up the system that needs to actually deal with, like, dude, in my hometown recently, this is making like state news, and I've seen some stories from the region about it, but these guys, or particularly one guy I went to high school with, murdered another guy I went to high school with, man. Freaking crazy. And then, like, two, is a big conspiracy. Like, they've arrested 4 people that were in on the murder, all because of, like, drugs, and I'm going to tell the cops on you, and blah, 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 and, oh, no, you're not. We're going to show you. And, I mean, just, like, normal things people talk about, but they actually killed this dude.
Yeah.
And, it was an unfortunate deal, man. That guy, like, was gone missing and then had a baby just like a couple of days ago. But they found his body like 9 days ago or something. I mean, not so, very unfortunate situation.
I've lived with and worked on and been friends with everyone from Secret Service, ATF, DEA, everyone, you name the list, man, all the way up to Texas Rangers and a lot of local cops, like wherever I've lived, man. I've never had that problem with authority. I have always hung out with a lot of people who've had that big a problem with authority. I have seen the things that cops tolerate and what cops don't tolerate, and it's pretty much like...
It's hard to know without being in that situation.
Yeah, once you're there, man, but... I just truly feel like most authority figures in our country are tired of enforcing the rules that are, and it's not just
that universally, like Joe Rogan was talking the other day about recreational marijuana, and it's like that he couldn't even hardly believe as high as the stats were on the last national poll, that it's like middle 60% on people that are just like, just make it recreational legal already. We're tired of just throwing money at everything, that has to do with it, for whether it's lobbying or, you get the whole thing about federal law versus state law. And I mean, it just on and on and on, and people arguing facts with crime rates and things it's just fascinating to me. But what here is one byproduct, and I don't think it's and I'm just like, well, this goes away if you make it federally legal. But one thing people are complaining about that's legit is like more people moving to these cities where it is full recreational legality. It's like Vegas just made it recreational, but Vegas is a major tourist spot. It's like people aren't moving to Vegas, I feel like, because it's legal. Yeah. Same thing for California. I feel like it's a tourist, weed tourism type deal. But for Denver, I believe it's like a level higher than weed tourism. I think people are moving to the region for different reasons, to be a grower, to work at a dispensary, just for medical reasons, like to take their kids there. I've seen some documentaries on that. Yeah. So like you get a lot of people flooding into the region, and then some of it is just straight up, dregs of society type stuff that are going there.
Chances are, if you're basing your life decisions where you want to live and have your
because of because of recreational marijuana. Oh, too funny. But I feel like that wouldn't even be something people could stand on if it was not for federal law.
Oh yeah, no.
It's not the will of the people anymore. So
No,
why
it's
is it the
not.
will of the federal government if the federal government's the
Speaking
people?
firsthand, when you're totally sober in our country, like you aren't drinking a beer, you've got nothing in your system, driving down the road is like, it's like a freedom. You just feel this certain type of freedom. If you smoked a joint 2 weeks ago and you know that if someone hit you and you got blood tested, you have that psychological thing. And I don't think America values enough the mental things that we bear upon ourselves because of these rules and these sanctions.
Huh.
And I'm one of those people who's tired of hypocrisy, bro. The ego and the hypocrisy.
Oh, I
has
love
got
it
to
when some senator or something that's voted, anti-gay marriage, his whole career gets busted in a bathroom
Yeah,
with some
exactly.
dude. It's just like people need to see and know about
You
that
hear
stuff.
small town things all the time, bro. And not just small town. Arizona was like that too, man. Phoenix
I'm just going to
here.
throw this out there. There's a rumor that there's a senator that's voted along those lines that's super conservative from Dardanelle, Arkansas, that actually had issued this statement from his office about people. Some people had been calling him about issues, and he's like issued them cease and desist letters.
Hmm.
Oh, can't call our guy anymore, our representative. But
Yeah.
the rumor is that guy's gay, and that he's been hypocritical. And it's like, as long as that's going on, and it's like that's going on because of the stigma of being gay.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't think that's something that you can legislate out, but it's so unfortunate, man. I've known a lot of gay people, and they are people too, and I'm been friends with them, and it's like, it's sad to me to see people that I know that base friendships on like, oh, no, I'm not gonna be friends with that person. They're gay. And it's like, and
Now, I'm going to take the devil's advocate side and say that I don't have a problem with someone being gay, but I do have a problem with gay culture. There's a whole, and that's why Hollywood is falling. That's why so many different.
yeah,
things
it, yeah.
And the real problem.
They
is,
do.
in my opinion.
Joe Rogan talking about that the other day. They do accept things within their culture differently, like that Milo Yiannopoulos thing, and like George Takei and Kevin Spacey. All of these people that it's like they're trying to say that it's an accepted thing within the culture for like underage, older, younger type
But
things to
here's
go
the
on.
thing. That's the norm in many places in the world.
It's all throughout history.
Yeah, all throughout history.
Samurai,
Exactly.
ancient Greek.
Yeah, and boys are for pleasure, women are for breeding, and that's something that's been pretty constant. And that it's unfortunate, but dude, the one thing that I can say is child exploitation. I would never stand for it. Once it's like basically someone being removed out of their zone of freedom, but
when I realize that these people don't speak for the entire community, like this Milo Yiannopoulos guy, but that has been a stigma that has been attached based off of these recent things going on in Hollywood and things of that nature. That's not. It's not moving things forward at all, I don't think. Maybe it is over time. It's like you look at civil rights in the 60s versus now and how far things have come, but still you look at Charlottesville.
Dude, things are explosive quantum leaps instead of a nice flow of open, respectful talks, man. It's a common theme. Like you just mentioned two different parts of society, but you can take that to any part of human civilization, bro. We just fight this acceptance of our reality. We fight it hard, man. And I think that
I wonder why I gotta fear judgment. I mean, why do people feel it's like, I tell people this: Jack Johnson, the boxer in 1905, 1904, early 1900s. And he was a guy who was a sports icon. He had white girlfriends, like could like speed through town and be like, "Hey, here's $100. Even though the ticket's $50, I'm gonna be coming back in an hour. Like I'm gonna be coming back through here. Don't pull me over."
Dude, high schools do it, colleges, and not just educational institutes. We take care of people who have potential. I'm telling you right now, I'm only here because a few people recognized in my teenage years that I had exceptional potential to do something or help people. And they made exceptions for me at a few points in my life, bro.
Yeah, it is weird how I've been given a lot of second chances too.
Yeah.
You know, and third chances, and how I just feel like if you own your failure,
Yep.
most of the time you can move past it, depending on what the issue is. And like maybe on some of these things, like what's his name, Harvey Weinstein or whatever. Maybe that dude got just like bitch slapped in a restaurant the other day by some just person that recognized him, and
recognized him.
yeah, but apparently, you know, like he's doing some things like seeing a counselor and has all this stuff that he's trying to do to like address his problems, but it's like that dude is never gonna be that's the unfortunate byproduct. A lot of this that's going on is I almost think that it's going to have a McCarthyism type effect on some people, and that I don't know if this is true or not, but like, for example, let's say it's not, James Franco has recently been accused of whatever. And I mean, it's like, man, in theater and acting and Broadway, it's like, that's a different culture in and of itself too. And let's say people are viewing what's going on right now, and like, they start thinking, well, was I ever sexually harassed? And it's like, I mean, there's that side too where on the Weinstein stuff, like a lot of women have come out against other women and said like, well, look, no one forced you to go to his hotel room. You chose to do that. You put yourself in that situation out of text message pressure? You know, like that's almost like I have a problem with that on a certain level.
More and more Americans are having a problem with that.
Now, I mean, but there is inappropriate behavior too. Like they're saying this Louis C.K. blocking the door and stuff like that, or but you know, I feel like, let's say, I don't know if James Franco's sexually harassed or assaulted anyone, but let's say he hasn't, and that affects his career in a similar way that it's affected like Kevin Spacey or Steven Seagal.
Canceled without any evidence, or maybe there's evidence that's being withheld. You know,
I'll say this: I have a friend that is from Hollywood that told me some stories about Kevin Spacey, and Family Guy was talking about Kevin Spacey like 5 years ago. And I do believe that is probably mostly true. I heard The Usual Suspects production was shut down because of Kevin Spacey's inappropriate behavior.
Really?
Yeah, because I just thought about watching Usual Suspects earlier, and I was like, I'm not watching it because
I can't watch this anymore. It's like Chris Benoit's career.
I am Kaiser Soze. Dude, it's funny. I watched, like, I tell people this periodically, when I was like an adult and had seen the movie Usual Suspects already. Have you seen that movie?
Yeah, man.
Classic, cult classic. I watched the movie with Eddie Murphy again, Dr. Dolittle. And one of the animals, like when he's like out like in the country or whatever, like when he's first, like the animals start talking to him, like this raccoon or something, like comes up to him, he's like, I am Kaiser Soze. And like, well, dude, how would I got that when I was a kid, man? I didn't see Usual Suspects till I was like 18 years old or something.
Oh, yeah.
And then I saw Dr. Dolittle, like, you know, as a younger, like earlier 20s. And I was like, what? Like, how would I have gotten that as a kid? But I guess that was a little Easter egg for my parents. I don't know, who also ironically never saw The Usual Suspects, I'm sure. Yeah.
Anyway. Things get pretty adult. Man, the latest Pirates of the Caribbean, totally adult. Very adult topics.
What is the name of that?
Dead Men Tell No Tales.
Yeah, a friend of mine worked on filming at World's End.
Really?
Also filmed National Treasure 2, Book Secrets. He's going to come on the podcast.
Cool.
So he's done a lot of cool stuff. You can look him up on IMDb. Michael Sandow. He's a super cool dude. Lives here in Russellville. Moved here a few years ago, and he's helped me set up the lighting in the room, actually.
Really?
Yep.
That's cool.
So.
Yeah, I like the place.
Thanks for coming on, man. Anything else you want to throw out there before we wrap it up?
Yeah, watch the Matt Groening was predicting the future video to build on what you said about the Family Guy. Matt Groening.
Okay, right on, dude.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on, my friend. Always look forward to hanging out with you. You're going to have to come back on. I mean, it's a perk of having this podcast. I get to have cool people on and sit down and talk. And it's, you know, you're shooting because like all this stuff that I talked about, I would love to have a yoga instructor, a chiropractor, just like all these contrasting opinions of things that, you know, big parts of people believe in, don't believe in, or talking about, naysaying on. It's like, well, let's gather the perspectives. Let's break it down and be open-minded. So appreciate you coming on, sharing your take on things. As always, good seeing you, my friend, and I guess we'll be signing off.
Thank you.